Hi, I'm Rashonda Cade. Welcome to Reading with Rashonda. We are still reading Clotel by William Wells Brown, and today we start Chapter 19, Escape of Clotel. The fetters galled my weary soul, a soul that seemed but thrown away. I spurned the tyrant's base control, resolved at least the man to play. No country has produced so much heroism in so short a time, connected with escapes from peril and oppression, as has occurred in the United States among fugitive slaves, many of whom show great shrewdness in their endeavors to escape from this land of bondage. A slave was one day seen passing on the high road from a border town in the interior of the state of Virginia to the Ohio River. The man had neither hat upon his head or coat upon his back. He was driving before him a very nice fat pig, and appeared to all who saw him to be a laborer employed on an adjoining farm. No Negro is permitted to go at large in the slave states without a written pass from his or her master, except on business in the neighborhood. "Where do you live, my boy?" asked a white man of the slave as he passed a white house with green blinds. "Just up the road, sir," was the answer. "That's a fine pig." "Yes, sir, master liked this chope very much." And the Negro drove on as if he was in great haste. In this way he and the pig traveled more than 50 miles before they reached the Ohio River. Once at the river they crossed over. The pig was sold, and 9 days after the runaway slave passed over the Niagara River and for the first time in his life breathed the air of freedom. A few weeks later, and on the same road, two slaves were seen passing. One was on horseback, the other was walking before him with his arms tightly bound and a long rope leading from the man on foot to the one on horseback. "Oh ho, that's a runaway rascal, I suppose," said a farmer who met them on the road. "Yes, sir, he been run away and I got him fast. Marser will tan his jacket for him nicely when he gets him." "You are a trustworthy fellow, I imagine," continued the farmer. "Oh yes, sir, Marser puts a heap of confidence in this nigger." And the slaves traveled on. When the one on foot was fatigued, they would change positions, the other being tied and driven on foot. This they called ride and tie. After a journey of more than 200 miles, they reached the Ohio River, turned the horse loose, told him to go home, and proceeded on their way to Canada. However, they were not to have it all their own way. There are men in the free states, and especially in the states adjacent to the slave states, who make their living by catching the runaway slave and returning him for the reward that may be offered. As the two slaves above mentioned were traveling on towards the land of freedom led by the North Star, they were set upon by 4 of these slave catchers, and one of them unfortunately captured. The other escaped. The captured fugitive was put under the torture and compelled to reveal the name of his owner and his place of residence. Filled with delight, the kidnappers started back with their victim. Overjoyed with the prospect of receiving a large reward, they gave themselves up on the 3rd night to pleasure. They put up at an inn. The Negro was chained to the bedpost in the same room with his captors. At dead of night, when all was still, the slave arose from the floor upon which he had been lying, looked around, and saw that the white men were fast asleep. The brandy punch had done its work. With palpitating heart and trembling limbs he viewed his position. The door was fast, but the warm weather had compelled them to leave the window open. If he could but get his chains off, he might escape through the window to the piazza and reach the ground by one of the posts that supported the piazza. The sleeper's clothes hung upon chairs by the bedside. The slave thought of the padlock key, examined the pockets, and found it. The chains were soon off, and the Negro stealthily making his way to the window. He stopped and said to himself, "These men are villains. They are enemies to all who like me are trying to be free. Then why not I teach them a lesson?" He then undressed himself, took the clothes of one of the men, dressed himself in them, and escaped through the window. In a moment more he was on the high road to Canada. 15 days later, and the writer of this gave him a passage across Lake Erie and saw him safe in the Britannic Majesty's dominions. I just want to stop here for a moment. So William Wells Brown was conducting people to freedom, right? He just said it right there. 15 days later, and the writer of this gave him a passage across Lake Erie. So we know he worked on ships before, and we know he escaped to freedom, and now we have proof, at least so says him, that he is helping others to escape. That's kind of cool to talk about in your novel. All right, back to the novel. We have seen Clotel sold to Mr. French in Vicksburg, her hair cut short, and everything done to make her realize her position as a servant. Then we have seen her resold because her owners feared she would die through grief. As yet her new purchaser treated her with respectful gentleness and sought to win her favor by flattery and presents, knowing that whatever he gave her he could take back again. Oh, let me give you this pretty little goo-gaw, gee-gaw, doodad thingy. And let me snatch it right back. Ha ha! That's not cool. But she dreaded every moment lest the scene should change, and trembled at the sound of every footfall. At every interview with her new master, Clotel stoutly maintained that she had left a husband in Virginia and would never think of taking another. That's not exactly false. She had a husband who left her. But I understand the story. The gold watch and chain and other glittering presents which he purchased for her were all laid aside by the quadroon as if they were of no value to her. In the same house with her was another servant, a man who had from time to time hired himself from his master. William was his name. He could feel for Clotel, for he, like her, had been separated from near and dear relatives, and often tried to console the poor woman. One day the quadroon observed to him that her hair was growing out again. "Yes," replied William, "you look a good deal like a man with your short hair." "Oh," she rejoined, "I have often been told that I would make a better looking man than a woman." Let's just let that settle in for a moment. You look a good deal like a man with short hair, and I have often been told that I would make a better looking man than a woman. I find that really, really, really hard to believe because at the very beginning of the novel, Brown went on and on and on about Clotel's beauty. She was a beautiful woman in all the ways. And being a beautiful woman in all the ways means not just that her face looked like a beautiful woman's face, but her body as well, right? So we're just going to let that settle in. Had to pause here for a moment. Think about it. And I press on. All right, Clotel is talking. If I had the money, continued she, I would bid farewell to this place. In a moment more she feared that she had said too much, and smilingly remarked, I am always talking nonsense. William was a tall, full-bodied Negro whose very countenance beamed with intelligence. Being a mechanic, he had, by his own industry, made more than what he paid his owner. This he laid aside with the hope that some day he might get enough to purchase his freedom. He had in his chest $150. His was a heart that felt for others, and he had again and again wiped the tears from his eyes as he heard the story of Clotel as related by herself. If she can get free with a little money, why not give her what I have, thought he, and then he resolved to do it. An hour after he came into the quadroon's room and laid the money in her lap and said, There, Miss Clotel, you said if you had the means you would leave this place. There is money enough to take you to England where you will be free. You are much fairer than many of the white women of the South and can easily pass for a free white lady. So immediately before, he was like, oh, you look like a man. And now, I don't know, let's say an hour later, he says, oh, you could absolutely pass for a free white lady. Thought you looked like a man. And you can get to England on $150? Why hadn't William gone yet? And let's notice the contrast between William being a full-bodied Negro. That's like saying he's a full-blood Negro, so he's dark-skinned. And Clotel is so light-skinned that she could pass for a free white lady. And let's also think about how William called her Miss Clotel. Isn't that nice? She gets an honorific, Miss. She never had the honorific Mrs., but now another slave is giving her the honorific Miss. That's just a lot to cogitate, a lot to think about and let settle in. I'll keep reading. At first, Clotel feared that it was a plan by which the Negro wished to try her fidelity to her owner, but she was soon convinced by his earnest manner and the deep feeling with which he spoke that he was honest. "I will take the money only on one condition," said she, "and that is that I effect your escape as well as my own." "How can that be done?" he inquired. "I will assume the disguise of a gentleman, and you that of a servant, and we will take passage on a steamboat and go to Cincinnati and thence to Canada." Okay. What? All right, so Clotel is a beautiful quadroon woman who could easily pass for a free white woman, but to escape from slavery, she's going to disguise herself as a gentleman. So this black slave woman is going to disguise herself as a free white man and take a dark-skinned black man posing as her slave, and they're both going to escape to freedom. I love it. I love it. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about racial passing, and this whole cross-dressing thing throws us right into the area of minstrelsy. I don't remember if we've talked about minstrelsy or not, but minstrel shows were basically shows where white men mimicked slaves, and they often had cross-dressing bits. So now we have a slave woman who looks white cross-dressing as a white man, and she's going to take a black man along with her for the ride. This stuff is hilarious. People wonder why I love this stuff. Because of this. This is blowing my mind. And we should also read Running 1,000 Miles for Freedom, which is the story of William and Ellen Crafts. Yeah, we've got to check that one out too. But anyway, I've digressed. We will move on. Here, William put in several objections to the plan. Yeah, because you have to put in objections to this plan. He feared detection, and he knew well that when a slave is once caught when attempting to escape, if returned, is sure to be worse treated than before. However, Clotel satisfied him that the plan could be carried out if he would only play his part. Come on, man, play your part. You can do it. We can do this together. It's gonna be fabulous. Why does she have to dress up like a man, though? Like, why can't she be a slave? Why can't she be a white woman escaping with her slave? I mean, okay, white women didn't travel as freely as white men did, but still, it seems like it would be easier for her to pull off being a woman, since she was a woman, rather than cross-dressing and having to walk like a man and talk like a man. Let's keep reading. The resolution was taken, the clothes for her disguise procured, and before night everything was in readiness for their departure. That night Mr. Cooper, their master, was to attend a party, and this was their opportunity. William went to the wharf to look out for a boat, and had scarcely reached the landing ere he heard the puffing of a steamer. He returned and reported the fact. Clotel had already packed her trunk and had only to dress, and all was ready. In less than an hour they were on board the boat, under the assumed name of Mr. Johnson. Clotel went to the clerk's office and took a private stateroom for herself and paid her own and servant's fare. Besides being attired in a neat suit of black, she had a white silk handkerchief tied around her chin as if she was an invalid. A pair of green glasses covered her eyes, and fearing that she would be talked to too much and thus render her liable to be detected, she assumed to be very ill. Okay, so we have Clotel. Beautiful face of a woman, beautiful body of a woman. She's attired in a neat suit of black. A neat suit of black. Neat. really means that it's form-fitting. She is in a fitted black suit that is showing off her womanly figure, not a manly figure. She's got a silk handkerchief tied around her chin and draped around her neck as if she was an invalid. A pair of green glasses, like green bottle glasses. And she's pretending that she's sick. This is hilarious. This cracks me up every time because you've got to picture it. Like, you can just read the words, but there's this beautiful woman decked out in this nice, tight-fitting man suit with a scarf on and some green glasses. She looks fabulous. Nobody is going to think she's a man. Come on now. Come on now. But that is the beauty of minstrelsy. You know what you're looking at is false, but you play along with the game anyway. And it is my contention that minstrelsy is what we have happening here. I will keep reading. On the other hand, William was playing his part well in the servants' hall. He was talking loudly of his master's wealth. Nothing appeared as good on the boat as in his master's fine mansion. I don't like these steamboats nohow, said William. I hope when master goes on a journey again he will take the carriage and the hosses. Mr. Johnson, for such was the name by which Clotel now went, remained in his room to avoid, as far as possible, conversation with others. After a passage of 7 days, they arrived in Louisville and put up at Go's Hotel. Here they had to await the departure of another boat for the north. They were now in their most critical position. They were still in a slave state, and John C. Calhoun, a distinguished slave owner, was a guest at this hotel. They feared also that trouble would attend their attempt to leave this place for the north, as all persons taking Negroes with them have to give bail that such Negroes are not runaway slaves. The law upon this point is very stringent. All steamboats and other public conveyances are liable to a fine for every slave that escapes by them, besides paying the full value for the slave. After a delay of 4 hours, Mr. Johnson and servant took passage on the steamer Rudolph for Pittsburgh. It is usual, before the departure of boats, for an officer to examine every part of the vessel to see that no slave secretes himself on board. "Where are you going?" asked the officer of William, as he was doing his duty on this occasion. "I am going with Marser," was the quick reply. "Who is your master?" "Mr. Johnson, sir, a gentleman in the cabin." "You must take him to the office and satisfy that captain that all is right, or you can't go on this boat." William informed his master what the officer had said. The boat was on the eve of going, and no time could be lost, yet they knew not what to do. At last they went to the office, and Mr. Johnson, addressing the captain, said, "I am informed that my boy can't go with me unless I give security that he belongs to me." I know I keep pausing. It's like watching a TV show with me. It's awful, I hear. Actually, I don't hear that. I just assume it's awful. Because I stop all the time, because I have questions. What does Clotel sound like as she's talking? Right? Like, some women have deep voices, some women have high voices. I don't know what kind of voice Clotel has. I know that just when I talk, I don't sound particularly like a man. And when I try to talk lower, I still don't sound particularly like a man. What does she sound like? In her neat, form-fitted suit and her scarf and green glasses, looking fabulous. What does she sound like? "I am informed that my boy can't go with me unless I give security that he belongs to me." "Yes," replied the captain, "that is the law." "A very strange law indeed," rejoined Mr. Johnson, "that one can't take his property with him." After a conversation of some minutes and a plea on the part of Johnson that he did not wish to be delayed owing to his illness, they were permitted to take their passage without farther trouble, and the boat was soon on its way up the river. The fugitives had now passed the Rubicon, and the next place at which they would land would be in a free state. Clotel called William to her room and said to him, "We are now free. You can go on your way to Canada, and I shall go to Virginia to search for my daughter." Screech! Do you hear that? I love it that she wants her daughter. Do not get me wrong, but you went through all of this so you could be free and then go back? You went through all of this so William could be free. Just saying. All right. The announcement that she was going to risk her liberty in a slave state was unwelcome news to William. With all the eloquence he could command, he tried to persuade Clotel that she could not escape detection and was only throwing her freedom away. But she had counted the cost and made up her mind for the worst. In return for the money he had furnished, she had secured for him his liberty, and their engagement was at an end. After a quick passage, the fugitives arrived at Cincinnati and there separated. William proceeded on his way to Canada, and Clotel again resumed her own apparel and prepared to start in search of her child. All right, so she dropped the men's outfit, she's back in women's clothing, and now she decides that she's going to, dressed as herself, go back into a slave state to search for her daughter. That doesn't make any sense. Let's keep reading. As might have been expected, the escape of those two valuable slaves created no little sensation in Vicksburg. Advertisements and messages were sent in every direction in which the fugitives were thought to have gone. It was soon, however, known that they had left the town as master and servant, and many were the communications which appeared in the newspapers in which the writers thought or pretended that they had seen the slaves in their disguise. One was to the effect that they had gone off in a chaise, one as master and the other as servant, but the most probable was an account given by a correspondent of one of the southern newspapers who happened to be a passenger on the same steamer in which the slaves had escaped. And we're going to stop there. It's a fairly decent stopping point. The chapter continues because, quite frankly, it's super fascinating and it needs to continue. But we will stop there for now. We're going to ponder this mysterious escape with racial passing, with minstrelsy, with determining to go back into a slave state dressed as herself. This is getting really, really good. And that is our reading with Rashonda for today. And next time we will continue with William Wells Brown's Clotel. Thanks.